Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another edition of Community Talk. I'm one of your hosts, Bhagwant Singh Martin.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and I'm your other co-host, Martin Singh. It's a pleasure to be with you here again.
The topic today of this week's episode is finance and Maya.
Yes.
Right, and while we're doing this, I'm just picking up my notes here. Because this is something Maya, the concept of Maya in Sikh thought and in Sikh philosophy. Maya, actually, I think a lot of Punjabis, people like myself, would relate Maya directly to finance.
Mm-hmm.
But the Sikh thought is slightly different. It actually says that Maya is that which takes you away from God. It's a false illusion or delusion that relates also to money and wealth.
Correct.
But it's something that actually takes you away from the from God. So it's not specified amounts of Maya, but it's your consciousness. Is what is your consciousness saying about where you are and your relationship to the divine?
Correct. And by extension, perhaps even to your family and to your community as well.
Yes, very very much so, and it's I think in the Guru Granth Sahib it's talked about a lot, and I remember an expression. I believe it comes from the Guru Granth Sahib, but Maya Tari Anna Bola. So the one who runs after Maya is both blind and both deaf. So that means both blind to the sight of God, or to sight of family, sight of community, and deaf to those
same people,
same people, same concepts. So Maya affects us all in different ways, but we also have a community. I mean, someone done an analysis of Punjabi community and where our sort of socio-economic relationship is. A lot of us view the world through a petty bourgeoisie lens, especially those in the West. And the petty bourgeoisie being those who want to strive for the bourgeoisie and are not part of the bourgeoisie. And I think Guru Nanak Ji was clear. He was clear that he stood with the lowest of the low. So in terms of the spirituality, Maya obviously affects our spirituality. It stops us from actually being one with the divine.
So there's certainly the spiritual aspect as it exists, and then there's the impact of this, in terms of the problems that it creates for the community. We see this in a number of different places. I'm be interested to have our viewers' feedback, of course, as we always are interested in hearing their stories and whatnot. In our communities here, there's places where we see this all the time. People wanting to keep up with the Joneses. I'm not so sure if that's an expression that people in other parts of the world use, but certainly people here in Canada and America would be very familiar with that.
And so something familiar in the UK as well, or keeping up with the Sings in that case.
There you are.
There's actually, I just want to interrupt you, there's actually a wonderful video done by AKA Amazing, and I saw it on YouTube, and it shows two Punjabi families side by side and how they're competing with each other.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not familiar. I'll certainly have to check that out. But what it is that this competition, and for folks in our community, it's normally the big house and the nice car, is how it goes. And then you have parents being away from their children, working all hours, certainly making the sacrifice they need to put things on the table, which is necessary and good, but then working above and beyond that, so that they can show their status, and to other people in the community. And certainly it takes them away from their Sikhism, if for no other reason they don't have time to practice. But also too, what it does is that it separates them from their kids, family, community, and that type of thing. And we're starting to see the challenges of that now in terms of drug use and that type of thing in the schools. And
I mean, you mentioned about taking away from Sikhism and that, and this keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the Singhs, as it were. But even to an extent, you'll see it, especially amongst those recently arrived immigrants. The first thing, if they go to Central Island, Ireland and Toronto, the first thing they put on the Facebook status is enjoying at Central Island. and that is again sort of the competition that seems to take place in the community. I mean, competition. If there's anything to be compete about, it should be we compete for the betterment of the community.
Correct.
But rather, there seems to be a small thinking, you know, just within your friends or family circle. So, you know, I've arrived in Canada and I've gone to Central Island, you know, and this thought, I mean, obviously is far away from the Sikh thought, which is to be humble and not of service. But we do see this amongst our community, but also we see the people getting into complete debt over, you know, things like buying the house that they really can't afford, and they have to do 2 jobs and work all hours under the sun, and the impact of that. I mean, you've spoken about some of the impact on family lives living in Brampton.
Yeah.
What have you seen?
Well, so just to relate back to, you know, what you're talking about there, there's folks that are, well, as an example, truck drivers, they do a fantastic service to the community. They work very hard and that type of thing. However, there are some who basically, they're on the road for 2 weeks. They basically come home to, you know, drop off their dirty laundry, get some more food from their wife, and then they're back on the road again for 2 weeks. And they do this continuously throughout the year. Certainly it's their choice, and I don't begrudge them for it. But what happens is that 2 things. 1, they're doing it to keep up with the Joneses, but also 2, they're doing it just to keep up with their payments, because the cost of housing and whatnot has increased significantly. There's huge pressure on folks to own their own house, particularly to own their own detached house, as opposed to renting or whatnot. And so they're forced into this cycle whereby they have to, you know, continuously have to work, continuously have to be away from their family. Combined with that is that you have people, it's an unfortunate combination actually. One of the truly lovely things that exists about our Sikh community is that when people care about each other and they trust each other, the trust is, you know, absolutely blind, meaning that, you know, they'll go and they'll write a check out in that person's name with the, you know, intention and expectation that that person will do the right thing with it. Combine this with the fact that, you know, people are both desperate and interested, you know, being pulled, you know, towards Maya to earn more and more money. They hear folks on the radio or on the television, you know, offering, you know, higher rates of interest. They don't think at all about the risk. They don't have the understanding of how to invest, and also they're pulled by greed, and so they're placing money with people who are unscrupulous. And what has happened in our community so many times, I'd be interested to hear if there's any insight on this particular issue as to what's happened with the community and its history in the UK. But what's happened time and time again is that people have effectively had their money stolen away from them, either by, you know, unscrupulous, you know, mortgage advisors, or mortgage brokers, or financial advisors and the like. And so, you know, we should really, you know, we talk about Maya on a personal level, about ourselves being pulled away, but those people who are in the business of taking care of other people's money and advice and providing financial advice should also strip themselves away from Maya, because not only are they hurting themselves, but they're also hurting others.
I mean, there's a CBC documentary just done recently, and it's also made by the newspapers about the cost of a Punjabi Sikh wedding.
Correct.
And you know, we speak to the Ratnama. We've spoken to this in a number of shows. And the Ratnama was very clear on how and encourages. Maybe we will take that out further in another show at some point. But in terms of a Sikh marriage, we're looking at a ridiculous $100,000 cost. People are having to take out second mortgages, and people have to work all hours under the sun, all hours of the day, just to make this 2-hour event. And the Ratmara is very clear. It's a very simple act, you know, a spiritual act. But there's no spirituality. I don't see much spirituality in a Sikh wedding. I see actually a lot of greed, a lot of expense. That I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much it helps the couple. And is it done for the couple, or is it done for just for family name and family honor? right? Again, I come to this petty bourgeoisie sort of, trying to emulate the bourgeoisie, and that, which is again totally in contrast to Sikh thought, which looks for a humble wedding, and it's quite clear about, for example, dowry. Just before, in preparation for this show, I mean, we were talking to our cameraman who does a wonderful job of editing these programs, and he was saying that dowry is an expectation. Still in Canadian Sikh weddings.
Yeah, not called as such.
Not called as such, it's just an expectation. And usually takes the form of jewelry, clothing, cars, and sometimes houses, and sometimes condominium buildings, or condos themselves. So, we have, and this is maybe where culture and religion actually collide. Because culturally, there's an expectation, and religion, and where the religious is in total opposite.
Yeah, like you couldn't have a more stark difference actually between the two. In fact, it's a total and complete opposite, and it's an unambiguous opposite as well. What's fascinating to me is that like for those folks who are unfamiliar with the CBC, it would be our equivalent of the BBC, meaning it's the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and they of course broadcast throughout Canada and around the world on CBC International. And what you have is that you have a country with a population of effectively 35 million people that's looking at a minority subgroup of people have different estimates of our population.
Half a million.
Let's say 500,000, and they've taken special interests, meaning that the weddings are so large and and so much money is being spent that there's a whole industry now around it. And so as a result of that, it's actually become mainstream news, meaning that it's newsworthy for the 33.5 million Canadians that are not of the Sikh faith, right? And so that tells you, how wide the gulf must become. To give folks an idea in terms of what can be bought for $100,000, the equivalent of the wedding, you could basically put one of your children through university for all 4 years of their degree. I think I dare say, residence, textbooks, and everything included.
Yes, $25,000.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, $25,000 a year. So I mean, you think about that. Like that's a huge amount of money when you make that comparison.
In the community, I mean, I know you live well within the Sikh community here in Brampton, in Ontario, Canada. What do you see as the effect on the next generation? I mean, when the parents are sort of running around trying to keep up with the Joneses or keep up their mortgage payments, for example. How does that affect the next generation?
Well, I mean, the first thing you see is that, the folks are not focusing on their family quite as much as they should be, right? You have kids coming home from school, not getting the support they need, not getting the direction they need, quite simply not because, the parents don't want to give them that particular direction, but they're just not in the house to do it, right? In some cases, they're coming home to an empty house. In other cases, they're coming home and the grandparents are there, and they're doing well to provide all the comforts of home, meaning make sure that they're fed and cleaned up and that type of thing. But they're not there to give the help, aid, and assistance to the children if they're with their studies or other difficulties that they have. Like, I mean, they're parenting, but they are not the parent, I guess, is if you see the distinction that I'm drawing there. And so as a result of that, social ills that might not otherwise be present are entering into the community, and that's most unfortunate, really. I mean, we don't certainly wish it on our community. We wouldn't wish it on any others. And so what it is that, folks have made a decision, to take big house and big car, over the success of their own family overall in terms of the development of their kids. And certainly, we're not saying that every single family is doing this, but it's happening a fair amount, and it's most unfortunate that that's the case.
Going back to the dowry thing, I mean, which still hasn't, is still, well, I call it dowry expectation. right? Even in Canada, or in UK, even come to that. Like it's very similar, on that point. The ratio, the sex ratio in Brampton, for example. I mean, you've looked at a bit of a study into this. I mean, this expectation, this Maya, right? What is it? What implication has this?
So what's interesting is that we know that when there's an additional cost burden on families associated with female children, whether it be dowry or weddings or whatever the case may be, we know that that is matched with female feticide. It's true in India, and it's also true in Canada. The interesting parallels that have happened here is that in the same way that the differences in costs of weddings has been so large that it got talked about openly in the mainstream media, so too was it the mainstream media that brought this to light.
Yes.
And so what you had was situations whereby you had teachers, be they of Indian extraction or not, working in communities where the majority of their children or a significant portion of their children were South Asian and Sikh. And what it was is that they were noticing skewed gender ratios. And then, of course, from that, what's happened is that people have started delving further into the data, meaning that if a firstborn child is a female, what is the percentage chance of the next child being born and kept a male? If the first two children born are a female, what's the next chance of the next child being born and kept as a male? And of course, from statistics, we know that it should be about 50% each time, right? But the numbers just go off the scale. And so what it is, certainly that, there'd be other factors that would, come into play there and that type of thing. But the additional costs of a wedding and dowry can not be overlooked in this particular regard. And if there's anything that will strip you away from your Sikhi faster, it is, choosing, a boy child over a girl child when the Almighty has, presented you, in pregnancy with a female child, right?
Do you think? I mean, do you see a change happening as generations go along? Obviously, the immigrant population, the first generation, they will still bring their ideas. These cultural practices, not religious. I would not call them religious practices.
Correct.
Completely opposite to the religious practice. But as the future generations develop or proceed, do you see that it will change? Dowry will slowly die as future generations, take the percentage of the number of Sikhs.
I think so. I do think so. I think that, high immigration rates now might hide that, but I think that we already start to see it, there will always be a percentage of the population that looks to keep up with the Joneses, irrespective of their faith or, ethnic background or whatever the case may be. But I think that as time goes on, in the same way that I see, at least in Canada, casteism, dying out with the generations and whatnot, I see that people, who are coming together to get married will be making conscious decisions that are different than those that their parents had made, based on the fact that, Canadian culture has, permeated in, which is, in an odd sort of way, allowed it to be closer to Sikhi. Yes,
it's the irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. And you can see that in the future. What's sort of happening now in the community in Maya? Is there some sort of consciousness that maybe we should look for a simpler life? I know that's been prachard at the Gurdwara, prachard being sort of espoused at the Gurdwara amongst the pracharaks about looking for a simpler life, but this brace in India that's taking place is being replicated here in terms of looking for keeping up with the Joneses. is the prachar not effective then?
I don't know. Like the thing is this: there are certain trends, and I'd be interested to hear what the British experience is on this. Like for example, when folks first started coming to Peel Region and Toronto and whatnot, they settled in the downtown, and that was fine and good. The downtown started getting built up, and so they started moving out to Peel, right? Meaning Mississauga and Brampton, among other places. Brampton and Mississauga are starting to get densified, meaning that people are starting to build up instead of building out. Our community, for whatever reason, does not want to live in an urban core, right? And condos downtown. Like there are very
actually, and this is a very interesting this point.
Yeah.
Because I see a divide here.
Really?
Because I see the young generation wanting to live downtown Toronto.
Interesting.
And the first generation wanting to move to the farm.
Right.
So when you go to downtown Toronto, you see a lot of second generation Canadian Sikh children, Canadian Sikhs, trying to get away from the families, some of them.
Yeah, that will do it. Yeah,
and they're moving downtown, and let's put it, there's many advantages living downtown.
Yeah,
employment being number one.
Right.
Whereas the first generation, they're looking to move to the countryside.
Yeah, in an effort again to replicate, what they feel they had in India, and so it's a fascinating thing, this distinction that's happening here, and perhaps it's the further permutation of Canadian values coming in.
Yeah, but they're both actually chasing Maya in their distinct forms.
That's it, in their own individual ways.
Yeah, but they're looking for the condo by the lake, and looking for the farm, with the
in the village,
the square foot. I don't know how many thousands of square foot house.
Yeah.
Right. So there's again, it's Maya. And this is another thing is, though the Sikh population is increasing downtown, for youngsters, the gurdwaras, the two gurdwaras that are in downtown Toronto, they're still empty. So that's a worrying fact.
Yeah.
Is the population, the young second generation, are moving downtown,
yes,
but they're not going to the gurdwara.
Or at least not going to the Gurdwara where they live.
Yeah, not the one they live. They may come when they come home to their parents in Brampton or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're not going to the Gurdwaras in either Pape Gurdwara, which is the original first Gurdwara in Toronto, and also the Western Gurdwara.
Yeah.
Those are still, underserviced or underutilized.
That's it.
And that is actually another, not a good sign for the community, I would say.
No, for sure. And so, like on this, we're coming to close to the end of our time. It's not that we don't want our Sikh brothers and sisters to do well and to succeed, and in all ways in their life, but we want to just raise the attention that people are making sacrifices in their life, placing money ahead of family in many particular cases, and to the detriment of their families and whatnot, and also in opposition to Sikh teachings. And so we're interested in hearing what folks have to say from around the world about this particular issue.
And till next time then, we'll say Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.